All right, so real quickly, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we classify different types of receptors in the body. And there are basically three ways we use to classify receptors: by their location, by their modality, and by their general structure. Okay, so basically, location is rather simple. Are these what are called exteroceptors or interoceptors? Are they detecting stimuli from outside our body or inside of our body? Okay. Um, and then your book talks a little bit about proprioceptors. Basically, proprioceptors are receptors that are found in connective tissues around joints, bones, to muscles and tendons, and that basically allow us to coordinate our movements. They tell us about how much muscle tension is there in a muscle, how much force do we need to apply to the tendon to create the right kind of movements. Proprioception is quite complex, but that's what these are all about. Think of proprioception as maintaining balance in space. Okay, so if there's any kind of trouble with the parts of your brain that are involved with proprioception, especially the cerebellum, what you're going to find are basically this person is going to have coordination issues. It could be something as simple as they may not be able to throw a ball properly or play sports, to the person may not be able to walk or run correctly or at all. Um, so proprioception is important, but your book isn't going to talk a lot about that, and I'm not going to either. I'm just going to mention it. So think of proprioception as balance. All right. And these exteroceptors, these are basically detecting. These are what you think of as your special senses, like taste, smell, sight, and hearing. Okay, these organs that are involved with the special senses are structurally very complex organs. Okay, these are receptors that you found embedded within lots of different types of tissue, and that have a lot of like, for example, the ears. I mean, the sensory receptors of the ears, the stereocilia of the ears are found within the cochlea of the ear. I mean, embedded within bone and water, and they need the help of the eardrum and the auditory ossicles so we can have hearing take place. I mean, it's a complex system of receptors. Same thing with the eyeball. Okay, the only nervous system part of the eyeball is the retina and the optic nerve. Everything else is just connective tissue and fluids to help support the vision itself, to get light rays in onto the retina so we can formulate an image. Okay, and we'll talk more about the anatomy and physiology of that when we get to the special senses. But some receptors are very structurally complex. The special sense receptors, taste and smell, again, those are receptors you find embedded within lots of epithelial or muscle tissue. So as a result, they're complex. All right, and then there are some more simply designed receptors that you find everywhere in the body, in the viscera and in connective tissue capsules and skin. Okay, blood vessels everywhere, that can be encapsulated, embedded within a little bit of excess tissue, or that are free nerve endings that are they're sensitive to the general senses you think about, like temperature, touch, pressure, all the chemistry, all right, all that stuff. So the general senses, the general sense receptors are structurally more simple, whereas the exteroceptors, the special senses are a lot more complex. Okay. And then when we talk about modality, all right, think of modality as type. Okay, think of the word modality as type, all right? And there are basically 5 different types of receptors in the body that detect different variations of mechanics, temperature, chemistry, and so on. Okay. The first type of receptor that I have on here is a pressure receptor, which is what we call a mechanoreceptor. Okay, so basically mechanoreceptors detect changes in pressure. There's lots of different types of mechanoreceptors in the body. You've got mechanoreceptors in your skin to detect, physical mechanical changes to the environment of your skin, touch. All right, there are mechanoreceptors, muscle spindles wrapped around muscle fibers to detect, muscle tension. All right, there are mechanoreceptors in your ear that detect vibrations. Okay, there are, there's mechanoreceptors in the arch of the aorta and in the carotid bodies of your carotid arteries. Okay, that are very sensitive to changes in blood pressure. All right, so mechanoreceptors are just designed to, like I said, detect changes basically in pressure. Okay, so physical force applied to that receptor, or physical force applied to that tissue. All right, and then you've got thermoreceptors. Thermo you think of as temperature. Okay, and these detect changes in temperature. Too cold or too hot. Okay, and there are thermoreceptors that act as exteroceptors that can, that are in our skin that can detect. Okay, I put my hand on this table, it's cold. Okay, I'm cooking, I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. I grab the handle too close to the pot, it burns my hand and it hurts. Okay, so we're detecting temperature changes. Okay, and then there are internal, interoceptors that are also thermoreceptors. Again, detecting changes in the temperature of our body. So we can, if we get too cold, we undergo, shivering, and if we get too hot, we sweat. Okay, so thermoreceptors, detecting changes in temperature. And then we've got, receptors that are sensitive to a wide array of different, of chemistry or chemicals. Okay, we call these chemoreceptors. All right, and again, when it comes to chemoreceptors, I mean, this can range from receptors that are, the complex special senses, taste and smell, to more simple receptors that are, that are found in the aorta guard to be specific, and the carotid bodies that are sensitive to changes in blood chemistry. Okay, and changes in pH essentially. So chemoreceptors are sensitive to chemical changes of the body. Okay, and electromagnetic receptors realistically are, in humans are found in the eye. Okay, these are what we call photoreceptors or light receptors. Okay, and there are two different types of these, cones and rods. All right, that are sensitive to changes in light that the eye is exposed to. All right, and we'll talk more about cones and rods when we get to the special senses. All right, and then there's another kind of sensory receptor that you find in the body called a nociceptor. Okay, nociceptors are often called pain receptors. Okay, but what nociceptors, these are sensitive to basically either to two things. There are two extreme types of stimuli. They're sensitive to extreme temperatures and basically extreme mechanics. Okay, pain basically. Okay, so they're basically sensitive to damaging stimuli. Okay, they're sensitive to damaging stimuli, and you find nociceptors essentially in they're found primarily in the skin, and they're found in the connective tissue capsules around your viscera, or your internal organs. Okay, so for example, if you have appendicitis, you have an appendix that's inflamed. Okay. When that appendix is getting inflamed and it's swelling and it's getting bigger, it's putting pressure on the peritoneum, the connective tissue sac that surrounds most of the abdominal viscera. Okay, so as that region of the peritoneum has pressure applied to it, due to the inflammation of the appendix, it's going to hurt. That's where that sharp pain comes from. All right, and then that's why when they want to physically check to see if you have appendicitis, they press on the area. That's why patients do this themselves. They press on that area because you press on the area and you relieve the pressure that the appendix is applying to the peritoneum. All right, and that which relieves some of the pain. All right. If a sharp object goes into your skin and you're damaging that tissue, all right, you're going to feel pain. You're going to stimulate the nociceptors. Okay. Me touching this tabletop and realizing that it's cool to the touch, I'm not stimulating nociceptors. I'm stimulating just run-of-the-mill thermoreceptors in the skin. Okay, but if I touch, if this was like a block of dry ice and I put my hand on it, or if this was a piping hot object and I put my hand on it, then that would be a strong enough stimulus to disrupt the receptor potential of a nociceptor, and then I would feel the pain. Okay, Now, one thing to bear in mind about this is that all of these different receptors, okay, all these different receptors are doing the same thing. Remember, they're transducers. Okay, they're just generating action potentials. Even though they're structured differently, they're different types of of nerve cells. Okay, they're all doing the same thing. They're detecting a change, a stimulus, a change in the environment, and they're sending that to the brain via action potentials. Action potentials are action potentials. A nervous impulse is a nervous impulse. So then you should ask yourself then, how are we able to classify pain, chemistry, temperature changes, body balance, and all that stuff? Okay, and the reason why the brain is able to figure out, okay, this is a temperature change, this is a pressure change, is basically the pathways that receptors take to the brain and where these pathways terminate in the brain. Okay, because you have to remember that these nerve pathways are going to different parts of the brain. Okay, and then those action potentials going to the specific areas of the brain can be processed as a specific type of information. Okay, so yes, these are very similar, the same types of action potentials, but because of the specific areas of the brain that they're going to, okay, that's how we're able to differentiate between proprioception, the special senses, all these different types of modalities we talked about. So basically, anatomy is what allows us to differentiate between all these different modalities. Okay, again, where the pathways from each of these receptors terminate within the brain itself. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, so again, these are this is how we classify sensory receptors. I want to spend a little time in another video segment talking about the general pathway of a sensory receptor to the brain.